picture a Hello Kitty plush doll for a second.
Oh, yeah, like the classic pink bow.
Exactly. You probably see it and instantly think of, childhood, right? It's
Yeah.
this universal bright pink symbol of total
All right, it's
innocence.
commercialized cuteness. It's totally safe.
But now I want you to imagine that exact same doll sitting directly at the center of one of the most gruesome, notorious crime scenes in modern history.
It is an incredibly jarring image. And I
Yeah.
mean, it really forces you to confront how easily the most mundane, innocent objects can be twisted, when they're pulled into a dark enough orbit.
Today, we are looking at how a single $500 dispute completely broke a justice system.
Yeah, and spawned an entire genre of hyper-violent cinema.
Right. And actually warped the real estate market of one of the densest cities on Earth.
To understand the gravity of what happened in 1999, you have to look at the machinery of the society that essentially chewed her up before the crime even took place.
Right.
By the time of the events we're discussing, she was a 23-year-old nightclub hostess. But her survival struggle was, it was lifelong.
From the very beginning.
Yeah, she was abandoned by her family as a child and grew up in an all-girls orphanage in Matawai.
I was reading through the background notes, and it seems like there was just no safety net for her at all.
Yeah.
Like the orphanage it timed out.
Yeah, that is the harsh reality of the institutional system she was in. At 15, she hit the maximum age limit.
Wow. 15.
So the system simply discharged her. She went from having a highly regimented, if austere, environment to being completely homeless on the streets of Hong Kong at 15.
That's just a recipe for disaster.
Completely. Unsurprisingly, she fell into drug addiction, which pushed her into street prostitution just to survive.
Right.
And she eventually married one of her clients, a man named Ning Chuyuan. He was also an addict and physically abusive.
So she is caught in this brutal gravitational pull of poverty and trauma. But the sources point out a shift around late 1998, right?
Yeah.
She actually manages to find some traction.
She did, yeah. She gave birth to a son.
Oh, okay.
And that became her anchor. She made this incredibly difficult, concerted effort to claw her way out of that life.
Wow.
She quit drugs entirely, she left her abusive husband, and she took a new job as a hostess at a karaoke club.
So she's really trying to turn things around.
Exactly. She was actively building a wall between her past and her child's future.
But the past didn't let go. Which brings us to the inciting incident. Fan stole a wallet from one of her former regular clients at a brothel she used to work at. The client was a 33-year-old triad member named Chan Manlock.
Yep.
The wallet contained 4,000 Hong Kong dollars. In U.S. dollars, that's roughly, what, $500?
Yeah, about 500. And for a triad member involved in drug trafficking, $500 is a rounding error. It's nothing.
Right, it's not about the money.
Exactly. In the ecosystem of organized crime, an offense like that isn't about the monetary loss. It is about a breach of hierarchy. It's about pride.
So he took it personally.
Very personally. When Chan realized she took it, he confronted her and Fan immediately returned the cash. She didn't put up a fight.
But that wasn't enough for him.
No, Chan decided that a simple return of the funds didn't repair the insult to his reputation. So he demanded a fee of 10,000 Hong Kong dollars on top of what she returned.
I mean, that's an impossible demand.
Completely impossible.
She's a single mother working at a karaoke club trying to live clean.
Right.
She does not have $10,000 lying around.
Right.
And when she couldn't pay it, the situation just spiraled. Chan, along with two accomplices in their 20s and a 14-year-old girl named Ah Fong,
Who, by the way, Chan was actively grooming at the time?
which is just another layer of awful. They abducted Fan, they grabbed her from her flat in the Liu estate and dragged her to a third-floor apartment at 31 Granville Road.
Right in the middle of Sim Shat Sui.
Right. Now, for anyone who hasn't been to Hong Kong, Sim Shat Sui is incredibly dense. It is packed with people, shops, noise.
It's bustling.
And yet, over the next month, they held her hostage there, and nobody intervened.
Well, that density actually provides a bizarre kind of camouflage.
Right, I mean,
When everyone is living on top of each other, people learn to aggressively ignore their neighbors. You tune out the noise.
oh, I see.
But inside that apartment, a very specific chemical environment was taking over. The captors were engaging in chronic, heavy methamphetamine use.
Let me stop you there. Because we hear, meth makes people violent all the time in true crime.
Sure.
But what is actually happening in the brain when three guys lock themselves in an apartment and smoke meth for a month straight.
It creates a closed neurological feedback loop. When you are on a heavy, sustained methamphetamine binge, you aren't sleeping for days.
Right.
Your brain's dopamine receptors are flooded and then completely exhausted.
Like a massive crash.
Exactly. This leads to a state of profound paranoia and irritability. But more importantly, it severely degrades the prefrontal cortex.
And that's the part that controls, like, decision-making.
Empathy, impulse control, and anticipating consequences. When you put a group of people in that state in a confined space, they feed off each other's delusions.
Oh.
It becomes a shared psychosis. The victim ceases to be human to them. She becomes an object for their amplified aggression.
And the escalation of that aggression is horrific. Over a month, they subjected Fan to unspeakable torture. They beat her with metal pipes. They deliberately burned her legs with hot wax and melted plastic so she physically couldn't walk to the door.
It's just horrific.
They rubbed chili paste and spices into her open wounds.
And they introduced a deeply sinister psychological element to the physical pain.
Right, the smiling.
Yeah. They forced her to smile. They made her say aloud that she was enjoying the torture. If she showed pain or cried, the beatings intensified.
It's the absolute destruction of a person's reality. Looking at how this escalated, I initially thought of it like a payday loan or a loan shark situation gone wrong.
Right.
But that's not right at all. The $500 debt was just a flimsy pretext.
Exactly.
This was about trapping someone vulnerable. The debt was a key they used to lock her in a nightmare where they could exert godlike control over her.
That's a great way to put it.
And she eventually died between April 14th and 15th of 1999.
The debt was merely the excuse they gave themselves to unleash that depravity. And what is equally crucial to understand is how this fortress of horror was finally breached.
Because it wasn't the police figuring it out.
No, the police didn't crack this case through brilliant detective work. They didn't trace cell towers or find a hidden clue.
No, it came from the one weak link in their psychological armor. The 14-year-old girl, Ah Fong.
Right. She was an accomplice, but she was also a child being groomed by Chan.
Yeah.
Shortly after the murder, she ended up at a girls' reform school for an unrelated issue.
Okay.
And once she was removed from that toxic, meth-fueled environment on Granville Road, the psychological dam broke.
She started having the night terror.
Relentless night terrors. She told a social worker at the facility that she was being haunted every time she closed her eyes by the ghost of a headless woman.
That is chilling.
The guilt was literally manifesting as a haunting. She eventually confessed the entire timeline to the social worker, who immediately took her to the police.
Which brings us to May 1999. The police raid that third-floor flat. And the scene is just, it defies logic.
It really does.
After Fan died, the perpetrators realized they had a body in a densely packed apartment building. So they dismembered her in the bathtub.
Right.
They boiled her remains to destroy the soft tissue and scattered the parts across multiple municipal trash dumps around the city.
But they kept one thing.
They made one very specific, terrifying exception. They kept her skull,
Yeah.
they boiled it, and then they sewed it inside the head of a giant mermaid-themed Hello Kitty plush doll.
This is unthinkable.
And they stuffed the rest of the doll with dead insects.
What's fascinating here is the sheer psychological dissonance of that physical space. Picture the room. It is a triad drug den.
Right.
It is a slaughterhouse where a woman was tortured for 30 days. But the decor, it was heavily themed with innocent Hello Kitty merchandise.
Curtains, bed sheets, kitchenware.
Exactly. And of course, the plush doll. It creates this jarring collision between the absolute darkest depths of human cruelty and the commercialized pastel aesthetics of childhood innocence.
It's sickening, but I keep getting stuck on the logic here.
What do you mean?
Well, if you go through the immense grotesque effort of boiling a body and quietly carrying bags of remains onto public transport to scatter them across the city.
Right, trying to hide the evidence.
Why on earth do you go out of your way to keep the skull hidden inside a child's toy right in your own living room? That seems like the quickest way to get caught.
You're trying to apply rational evasion tactics to a mind that is operating on sadistic possession.
Okay.
Keeping the skull was not about avoiding the police. It was a psychological trophy.
Wow.
By hiding her remains inside a toy in the exact room where they tormented her, they were maintaining a twisted, permanent ownership over Fan.
So even after she was gone.
Even in death, they were disrespecting her humanity, reducing her to stuffing for a cartoon character. It was the ultimate exertion of power.
But here's where it gets really interesting, and honestly where I completely lost my mind reading these sources.
The trial.
Yes. The physical evidence they destroyed, the boiling, that horrifying disposal method actually became their golden ticket in the courtroom.
The trial in late 2000 exposes a massive, very uncomfortable boundary in forensic pathology and criminal law.
Yeah.
Ah Fong testified against them. The perpetrators admitted to the kidnapping. They confessed to the month of torture. They confessed to the dismemberment and the disposal of the body.
Right.
Yet the jury voted 6-3 to convict the three men of manslaughter.
Nice.
Not murder, manslaughter.
I am still trying to wrap my head around this. You lock someone in a room, torture them with metal pipes and molten plastic for 30 days until they die, and the jury says, well, it wasn't murder.
Yeah.
How does the legal system allow that leap?
It comes down to the strict burden of proof required for a murder conviction. To prove murder, the prosecution must establish the intent to kill,
Okay.
which is intricately tied to the proximate cause of death. What was the exact biological mechanism that ended her life?
Right.
Because the perpetrators were so thorough in boiling the remains, there was no soft tissue left. The forensic pathologists only had a skull, a tooth, and some badly degraded organs.
So the medical examiner couldn't run a standard toxicology report.
Exactly. The medical experts on the stand had to admit a sliver of scientific doubt. They couldn't definitively say if Fan died directly from the physical shock and trauma of the beatings, or if she died because the men forced a massive overdose of methamphetamine into her system on the final day.
Oh, I see.
Because the coroner could not pinpoint the exact final biological trigger, the jury could not legally cross the threshold to declare it premeditated murder.
That is a terrifying loophole.
It is.
If you destroy a victim's body so completely that science can't figure out the final heartbeat, you get a discount on your charges. It feels like the justice system actively rewarded them for the brutality of their cover-up.
It is a deeply unsettling mechanical failure of the law. And Justice Peter Nguyen, the judge presiding over the case, was visibly frustrated by this constraint.
Okay.
Since he couldn't sentence them for murder, he gave them the absolute maximum penalty allowed for manslaughter,
Right.
life sentences. In his remarks, he stated he had never encountered such, quote, cruelty, depravity, callousness, brutality, violence, and viciousness. He stipulated that they shouldn't even be reviewed for parole for at least 20 years.
But the system still failed to contain them. Look at the timeline. One of those killers, Boon Shingcho, appealed his sentence. He got it reduced. He walked out of prison a free man in 2014. And then, in 2022, he was arrested and jailed again for sexually assaulting a 10-year-old girl. It is infuriating.
It highlights the sheer impossibility of fully rehabilitating that level of profound predatory deviance.
So how does a crime with this specific theatrical flavor of cruelty even happen? You mentioned earlier we need to look at the machinery of 1990s Hong Kong.
We do. This didn't happen in a vacuum. The late 90s in Hong Kong was an era of brazen, highly publicized violence.
Like what kind of violence?
You had criminal figures who were practically celebrities. Guys like Big Spender, who orchestrated the kidnappings of multiple billionaires demanding hundreds of millions in ransom. Triad violence was highly visible. And running parallel to this street violence was a bizarre anomaly in the local film industry.
Right, the Category 3 cinema boom. And wait, looking at the sources, this started as a child protection measure.
Yep.
How did a censorship law accidentally fund hyper-violent triad movies?
Well, in 1988, Hong Kong introduced a new censorship ordinance. It created the Category 3 rating, which simply meant a film was restricted to audiences 18 and older.
Like an R or NC-17 rating.
Exactly. The intention was totally bureaucratic, protect kids from inappropriate content while allowing filmmakers artistic freedom. But the triads saw a massive, legitimate loophole.
A way to make money legally.
A way to wash dirty money and a way to make massive profits. It spawned a booming industry of low-budget, extreme exploitation films, often called Hong Kong Gothic.
Okay.
Because it was suddenly a legitimate theatrical category, filmmakers pushed the absolute limits of gore, extreme sexuality, mutilation, and class warfare. The triads bullied their way into production, intimidating actors and forcing directors to churn out these movies.
And the overlap between this cinema and the Hello Kitty murder is uncanny. In fact, after the trial, the crime inspired its own Category 3 films, like Human Pork Chop.
Right.
But the sources have a really intense debate about the causality here.
Yeah.
Was the crime a product of the culture or just a drug-induced anomaly?
It's the central question of the sociology reports we looked at. On
Right.
one side, you have a former police officer from that era.
Okay, what's his take?
He argues that these triad members grew up marinated in this hyper-violent culture. They were watching Category 3 films that normalized the torture and mutilation of women.
So the media influenced them.
Yeah, he argues the movies gave them a vocabulary for their sadism. But on the other side, a sociologist pushes back hard.
Interesting.
He argues that attributing this to movies ignores the brutal chemistry of the crime. He points squarely to the closed-group methamphetamine use.
Oh, right, the brain chemistry we talked about.
Exactly. He argues that if you lock 3 men in a room, pump them full of meth, and remove sleep for a month, human empathy naturally evaporates, regardless of what movies they've seen.
It's an incredible debate. Is this extreme cinema acting as a mirror, just documenting the grotesque reality of what triads were already doing in drug dens? Or is it acting as a blueprint, handing these guys a script to follow?
It's the classic chicken or the egg.
Honestly, it might be both. The meth stripped away their inhibitions, but the culture gave them the idea to use a plush doll as a theatrical prop.
That's a very plausible synthesis.
So the killers eventually go to prison, the 90s end, the extreme cinema boom crashes. But the actual physical apartment building on Granville Road, it didn't go anywhere.
Nope.
And this leads us to the most bizarre economic afterlife of a crime scene I have ever read about.
You're referring to the hungza phenomenon.
Yes.
In Hong Kong real estate, a hungza is a tainted property. It's a house or an apartment where an unnatural death, a murder, or a violent suicide has occurred.
Right.
Instantly, that third-floor flat became one of the most notorious hungza properties in the city.
Now, in most cities, a house where a murder happened might be hard to sell for a few months, but eventually someone buys it.
Sure.
But in Hong Kong, the superstition is so culturally ingrained that it literally breaks the property market.
Right.
These places sell or rent for 15 to 40% below market value.
Yeah.
And it's not just individuals being superstitious, it's the financial institutions.
That is the most fascinating mechanism here. The banks actually build local superstition into their risk algorithms.
Which is wild.
If a property is classified as a hungza, major banks will often flat out refuse to underwrite a mortgage for it.
Unbelievable.
They view the bad feng shui as a literal financial liability because the resale value is permanently compromised.
Imagine trying to get a mortgage and your bank denies you, not because of the foundation, not because of your credit score, but because the property is haunted.
It's uniquely Hong Kong.
That is wild. But where there's a market inefficiency, there are investors.
Capital abhors a vacuum. A submarket emerged of cash-rich investors who dubbed themselves masters of haunted houses.
Masters of haunted houses. Wow.
Since you can't get a mortgage, they swoop in with hard cash, buy these prime real estate properties at a massive discount, and put them on the rental market.
But who is renting an apartment where someone was dismembered?
Usually expatriates or mainland exchange students, people who either don't know the hyperlocal history of the building or who are so desperate for affordable rent in one of the world's most expensive cities that they simply ignore the ghosts.
So they just look the other way.
Yeah, the investors are essentially running an arbitrage operation on the local population's trauma.
But even with cash investors, this specific building on Granville Road carried too much weight. The commercial shops on the ground floor stayed open, but the upper floor sat mostly vacant for a decade.
The community couldn't just move on.
Right. During the Hungry Ghost Festival, locals would gather in the alleyway behind the building. They would burn paper offerings, paper money, paper clothes, trying to appease the restless spirits they believed were trapped there.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it reveals how different layers of society process extreme trauma.
How do you mean?
Well, the legal system processed it through a highly technical manslaughter conviction.
Right.
The media processed it by turning it into exploitation films.
Yeah.
But the neighborhood, the local residents relied on ancient spiritual rituals to manage the psychic wound left in their geography. Eventually, the stigma won. The building was demolished in 2012.
And a shiny new boutique hotel was
Yeah.
built on the spot in 2016.
Yeah.
But even the hotel couldn't completely shake the legacy. They installed portraits of Buddha throughout the building as a sort of spiritual safeguard.
Yeah.
Think about that for a second. Think about the last time you booked a hotel in a major city. What if you found out your bed was resting on the exact geographic coordinates of a 30-day torture chamber?
It's a terrifying thought.
In a city as stacked and layered as Hong Kong, does the trauma literally seep into the concrete? Can you actually bulldoze over a nightmare?
The evidence suggests you can't entirely erase it. You can build a new hotel, but the cultural memory persists. The banks remember, the neighbors remember, and the stories continue to circulate. The physical space remains permanently tethered to the tragedy.
So what does this all mean? We started this deep dive with a stolen wallet and $500. That tiny spark ignited a month of absolute horror.
It did.
It exposed a terrifying biological loophole in the legal system.
Uh-huh.
It mirrored a booming industry of hyper-violent cinema, and it fueled a bizarre, cash-only submarket of haunted real estate.
It reminds us that violent crime is never isolated. It radiates outward like a shockwave.
100%.
It alters the law, it mutates pop culture, it dictates urban development, and it forces a community to grapple with the darkest aspects of human nature. Society has to invent mechanisms, whether it's a court ruling, a movie, or an incense offering, just to digest the horror.
It gets absorbed into the city's DNA. So here's a final thought to mull over as we wrap up. When a horrific human tragedy is digested by a society, when it becomes a cult horror movie, an algorithmic red flag on a bank mortgage, or just a steep discount on a luxury apartment lease, at what point does the very real agonizing suffering of a 23-year-old mother like Fan Man Yi fade into just another piece of urban folklore? Next time you see a cute pop culture mascot or you check into a brand new building in a crowded city, take a moment to consider what histories might be trapped in the foundation.